Hello and welcome to Who Dares Rolls. I am your host Mike B, and today we have a review for you. It's not a modern game, it's an older one. This is the Godfather Corleone's Empire from designer Eric Lang and publisher, call me or not, back from the bygone age of 2017. So it's not Bahamas. No, it's not. So what is it? Okay, it's a Lang Dudes on the Map game. It has elements of area control, and there's elements of worker placement, and has set collecting. There's a lot of stuff going on in here, and it's a fruity mix by all means. Now, I love The Godfather. It's a fantastic film, and Godfather 2 equally. It's a different movie, very deep movie. Number 3 isn't so great. But when Lang announced he was doing a Godfather game, I was pretty stoked. At the time, he'd just come off the back of Blood Rage. He was riding high and doing lots of stuff. And the prospect of Lang, who himself had said was Godfather was a favourite game of his, doing that was like, ooh, and I think I interviewed him at an expo just before the game came out. Because actually, that Godfather theme, it's a missed opportunity. It is in there. If you're coming into this wanting The Godfather, the board game, you're not really getting it here. It more is like a prequel of anything, I would say. There is elements of The Godfather we know and love. There's the horse head first player marker. There is characters, Brando's characters obviously front and centre. None of the other main characters turn up at all in this. In fact, none of the Corleone family really plays a part. You're playing one of the 5 families of the other lot. And the idea of the game is you're essentially fighting over Brooklyn in this period of time, this rise of power over different properties, jumping in and out of them. So that kind of missed the boat for me, because I was envisaging much more of a grandiose kind of retelling of Godfather, with all the interesting shit that went down in that. And if you've never seen Godfather, it really is a good movie. Go and watch if you like your mobster gangster movies. Absolutely astoundingly good fun. And there was lots of evocative art. There's some really nice art, and it's in the rule book. There's lots of nice art, and on the box there's nice art. In the game, there isn't very much nice art. Most of the cards are either really just the same bit of generic art of Corleone on there, of old Marlin, or the cards that you're collecting for the set collecting. And the board's cool, but that's kind of it. There's a little bit of art on some of the other characters, but the book has got a bunch of art in it. There was lots of pre-production art released for it. It looked fantastic, and yet none of it comes into the game. So anyway, the game, as I've said, is an area control game. You're playing one of these 5 families, and the idea is you're taking businesses. You're either you've got 2 types of miniatures. You have family members and thugs. The thugs have got the square bases, the family members have got the circle bases. On the map, you can see there's locations where you can buy a circle base, and a family member going down will affect any connected territories to that circle, and the rear businesses of them. On each business there's a tile, and there's a front part of the business of something you'll get, and the rear part of something you'll get. So every family member going down will, in the area connected to where they go, will get all the good stuff from all the backs of businesses. Very handy. The thugs, however, only affect the one front of business they're placed into, so they're more limited. As the game evolves, there's areas that you control, so there's also area control. At the end of every round, we work out who's got the biggest control influence over an area of connected territories, and they put one of their control markers on it to show that they control that area. In later rounds of the game, those areas that they now control, when someone does a bit of business at the front of the stores, I was going to say, or any of the things they're sitting a thug in, they also get to duplicate that action, which is very handy. On your turn, you're going to do an action. That's it. One thing you're going to do. You can either place one of your thugs, and I'll explain when you place a thug down, that affects the front business of the store. You can place one of your family members down, which will affect the rear businesses of the store. You can complete a job. So in your hand, you have these jobs, and they're set collecting. Essentially, you collect those cards related to what it shows on the left-hand side of the job, cash it in, you get the reward off the card, and usually it will do something funky or cool, either wipe people out or whatever. Once you complete a job, the job itself that you just completed goes in your tin. Did I say about the tin? Yes, you've got these suitcases there's a lot of mention of going to the suitcases and stuff in the original Godfather movies. So you pop into there, any completed jobs, and certain cards and areas and locations, the board will allow you to bank more into that. The only other stuff you can put in there is money, other than jobs when you complete them. That all rolls into the end game scoring, which I'll come to in a bit. The only other thing you do is play an ally, which again I'll come to as they turn up in a second. And that's it. And everyone plays until essentially everyone's passed. Now, a very important point, and always when you teach the game is always a very important point, is that once you've played out all your figures, you can't do anything else. So it's kind of the game strategy itself is using those resources, the initial armies, the troops, the family members you've got, and use them and trying to most efficiently, and a bit of the Imperial Settlers vibe to it, most efficiently play out everything in your hand in the most efficient purpose way, so to get the most amount of actions, most amount of stuff going on till you have to pass. A similar game that actually comes to mind is something like Tapestry. Does a very similar sort of thing to it. And that's pretty much it. Once everyone's finished a round, so yeah, there's then the turf war stage, which essentially, as we say, we work out who has area control and they gain control of areas. And then we have the bribery stage, where essentially there will be, depending on player count, these cards played out. And what they are, allies, that you can bid on at the end of the first act, the second act, the third act. You can bid on these allies. And they go in their own little separate decks of increasing power and abilities. And they involve police chiefs and mayors and other things, often related to a miniature that you place on the board and it has an effect. So what you can do is you can bid. Everyone's blind bidding at this point in time, but they only bid with whatever cash they've got in their suitcases at that point in time. Any bids you make, you're going to lose the cash out. And the cash will essentially, at the end of the game, relate or transfer into victory points. Some of these are really powerful, especially the third tier stuff where you get to that last round of bidding is very powerful. So they're worth having in your hand. Another important in safety tip that I get, which is really brutal towards the sort of second and third acts of the game, is that when you move to the next act, you have to cash down to 5 cards. You have to discard anything else. So any cards you've bribed, that you've bought, any cards you're resisting from the last round, you've got to look through them and decide what of those 5 you keep. And that is the same rule in place until Act 3, when you're allowed to keep 6. As I say, there's not much to it. You have one action you do on your turn, and it's going to be placing either one of 2 miniatures down, playing a card, or placing one of your allies. That's it. That's all you're doing. And where the complexity and the head scratching and the stress and everything else comes to is this mix, this stew of this area control and these properties coming down. And most importantly, as there's more every round coming down on these properties, certain territories start off weak, not really worth controlling. But it's later game, if they get one of the real hot commodity properties on it, like the drugs dens, which allow you to get the drugs cards, which are essentially jokers for all the other items you're collecting for missions, they can become really contested over. Then there's obviously cards that allow you to have gang warfare and kill miniatures, take them off the board. As I say, some of the allies have some really powerful swingy moves that they can do. And it's a really tightly designed, really just a very efficient engine, and it just flies through. And initial rounds, once you know what you're doing with this game, you can really tank through it. But that complexity just builds and builds and builds as you go to rounds. So whereas the first act is relatively brisk and breezy, and everyone will probably take their 3 mini actions, maybe complete a mission, zip through it, and kind of get a feel for it, which is kind of what it's doing. It's giving you sort of this is how the game works. And then from Act 2 onwards, that suddenly the pressure starts being applied, that complexity starts kind of ramping up. There's more buildings and the things. Suddenly you've got the area control factor. Do you want to give that area to someone to control for the next round? Do you want to try and take it yourself because there's some juicy actions in there? It's the economy of the jobs cards. The jobs cards are kind of life in the game because they're like free actions. If you can get stuff and cash it in. So getting more of them can sometimes be a fight. They can be limited on the board how you can get to stuff. And it really does become that mob war, close quarters sort of battle over areas. And it's great. The card play, the area control, the worker placement feel to it, that set collecting, all of that kind of just mixes together in this whirlwind of fun. And it's brilliant. I really enjoy it. As I said, it's a mob game. It's not really a Godfather game. It is there. But really, you don't really care once you're caught up in this sort of skirmish over these areas and escalation of this war. It's fantastic. It's lean. It's mean. It works wonderfully. It's a game that I've taught to, I say muggles, but people definitely have not played very modern board games, and they pick it up, grok it. That nice first round is kind of a gentle ease into it until you get to those rounds 3 or 4 where it's suddenly this, and yeah, they're probably a bit outgunned at that point in time if they haven't really played many of those deeply strategic grown-up board games, should I say. I love it. It's really great, and for a while it's been cheap, it's been off the thing. I know I saw a tweet the other day of Eric had announced that about the never printed expansion for this game, which I would have loved to have known what that was. There was spaces in the box, not much, but God, I would have liked that expansion for this game, even if it added just a little bit more of what we already got. There it is. That's how it plays and how it is. And the final thoughts on the matter, well, I think I've summed up really well. I love the game. I think it's astoundingly good mechanically sound, really good fun. If you like dudes on the map, if you like all that sort of what I've said it's doing, which is that mix of all sorts of stuff, hidden information, area control, card play, worker placement, edge, set collect. I mean, it's got a lot going on in here, but in an itty bitty package to teach. Yes, it's overproduced. The tins for the money is just a bit silly. They're obviously festooned with miniatures, with very nice, cool miniatures, and the art is okay. Actually, the one thing that drops off the radar is in the art I mentioned earlier. The board's really cool. I quite like the board, but the lack of art on those cards is kind of just a bit. It doesn't, at the end of the day, really matter. But I think a bit more thematic to those cards would have just embroiled you more into the Godfather theme. You know, there's guns and shooting and stuff going on in this card. Just a little bit more thematics to it. Would have been, and the art's gorgeous. Share more of it, put more of it out there. Would have been a real difference to making this really, really sing with that theme. The other game similar to me is Sons of Anarchy is a similar-ish thing, a vibe to it, though I think it's a bit clunkier, and it's got a few other different mechanisms going on in there, but of a similar sort of a brother from another mother, essentially, to the Godfather. Of the two, Godfather's definitely, I think, the better game. And Sons of Anarchy is really hard to get at the moment. I think GF9 don't print it anymore. I think it's out of print. So if you're finding it, it's going to be probably in the second-hand market. But if you can't track Godfather down, its cheaper cousin, or used to be cheaper cousin, not quite as great cousin, it is Sons of Anarchy. It's still quite a good mix of similar sort of stuff. But well worth looking to do. I think this has still been printed. It, for some reason, didn't do as well as it should have done. And I think it's one of the Eric's designs, Eric Lang design, which actually is really kind of flies under the radar. And it gets a lot of noise about the Mystic trilogy, or whatever like it is, the dudes on the map, the Ankh, and so on, Rising Sun and all that. But actually, this is a solid, really solid design by him. It calls back to the elements of Chaos in the World, of that kind of level of really good, solid game, which is a game I wish they'd reprint. So there you go. Yeah, component-wise, everything is solid in there. I've given you my misgivings of it. Essentially, there is no negatives really in it. If you can pick this up at a reasonable price, and you're a fan of that style of stuff that I've already mentioned, you want it to win it all day long. It's great. Really did. I highly recommend it. It's one I really, really recommend of all of the many projects that Lang has been involved in. This is probably his finest hour. I love Blood Rage, and I'm kind of digging on Ankh at the moment, but and all his other stuff, Arcadia Quest and all that. But really, thin all this out. This didn't even go to Kickstarter. Straight to retail. This is probably the one real golden shining moment of his relationship with Corleone. It actually just works so well on a game for entry level, fairly easy, really good gameplay. It's only failing, if anything, is just it drops the ball on that Godfather theme. It's the only thing. But I give it a pass on the fact that everything else is fucking a game. I don't know what that happened. Anyway, there you go. There is a review. There was Godfather from Corleone Art, designer Eric Lang. Plays 2 to 5. And what I didn't mention is, and even on lower player counts, this game actually works really well. It's real tight either way you play it. All the way up to 5 players. It works all the way through on them. It's really good. I fucking love this game. It's really great. Just wish the theme was fucking better. I'd be a happy monkey if that was the case. As it is, I'm just mildly elated. So yeah, it's a game we recommend. Who does well recommends it? Something's definitely up. maybe a fun, maybe something else. This has been Who Dares Rolls. Might be. That was The Godfather from Eric Lang. What a cracking game. There's a bunch of other ones. They're shit. Don't bother buying them. Godfather, Corleone's Empire. That's the one you want. Go and get it. Track it down now. I say so. I'm making you an offer you cannot refuse. I had to get one in there somewhere. Now make me a Scarface game. Eric, get the fuck on that shit. I want to be king of the world and all that sort of stuff. Thank you and good night.